you're in our thoughts and prayers. So thanks for being here today. Yep. Whatever you need on our part, let us know. I know we're behind you 100%. What's that? More money. More money. I think you got to come back next year to get that. All right. Committee, we're going to go ahead and open the hearing on SB 142. Chris, would you give us an overview?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee Senate Bill 142 requires drivers to proceed with due caution when passing stationary vehicles displaying hazard lights. The bill would also create a new traffic infraction for violating the provision. Section 1 would provide that a driver approaching a stationary vehicle displaying hazard lights must take one of two actions. And subsection A1, that would require a driver that's traveling on a highway with at least 2 lanes going in the same direction to change lanes away from the stationary vehicle with regard to road, weather, and traffic conditions. And then subsection A2 requires a driver that is not traveling on a highway with at least 2 lanes or changing lanes would be unsafe, then such driver should approach the stationary vehicle with due caution and reduce speed, again, with regard to road, weather, and traffic conditions. Section 2 creates the new traffic infraction and puts that in uniform fine schedule for unlawful passing of a stationary vehicle, and the fine is $75. Senate Committee on Transportation recommended the bill favorably for passage with no amendments, and the bill passed the Senate Committee of the Whole 38-2. The bill would become effective upon publication of the statute book. I would stand for questions. Sorry.
Thanks. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that breakdown. 2 quick questions. Does this make it a moving violation?
No,
not a moving violation. Okay. And then my second is there any, we've had conversations about this with bills previous this year. Is there any time period for education, I guess, or are we saying, July 1, we're going to enforce this?
Yeah, there is no warning provision. So effective July 1 of 2024, it would be a violation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Neely.
Can you give us a little example of what passing a stationary vehicle? I mean, that it's a little vague.
Yeah, it's a situation where any vehicle is on the side of the road, has their hazard warning lights on, and say you're traveling on a 2-lane highway, you would need to get into the left lane and leave the lane closest to them open. Again, if you can do so safely.
Representative Delperdane.
Just real quickly, I'm looking through the fine section. I'm just trying to find out what is the fine. Where is it showing up?
Yeah, it's $75, and it is on page 7, kind of near the top.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's in italics. Any other questions for the reviser? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to start with the proponents, and they've asked for me to shuffle this around a little bit. So we have listed Travis Lau with AAA, but Travis is battling the flu like I think many of us have. And so Sean Stewart with AAA is going to provide testimony. Welcome to the committee, Sean.
Thank you. I'm here as a proponent, obviously, of Senate Bill 142. AAA proudly serves over 350,000 Kansans across the state and 64 million members nationwide. On behalf of AAA, we'd like to thank you all for this opportunity to appear to support legislation we believe will improve road safety for Kansas drivers, including vulnerable bystanders alongside the road. SB 142 is a 2-prong approach to protect drivers who are stranded on the side of the highway and a disabled vehicle, as well as other drivers on the road. By disabled vehicles, we're referring to stopped vehicles on the side of the highway that are displaying hazard warning lights, road flares, caution signals, including traffic cones, caution signs, or reflective triangles. So all of those are specified in the language of the statute. So if you don't have your hazard lights on or any kind of warning sign, it would not be covered. Senate Bill 142 works in two scenarios, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. The bill says if a driver is on a two-lane highway and comes upon a disabled vehicle, the driver needs to proceed with due caution as they pass the disabled vehicle. Proceeding with caution means being aware and slowing down. The bill does not say you need to slow down to a certain speed, as is specified in other states. We're talking about braking, slowing down, and being careful, i.e. not whizzing by somebody changing a tire at 75 miles an hour. The bill language states that if the driver is on a multi-lane highway, like an interstate, and comes upon a disabled vehicle, the driver needs to switch lanes, move a lane over if possible, and or slow down as they pass that disabled vehicle. It's very common to see disabled vehicles on the side of the roadway. The drivers and occupants may be changing a tire. The hood is propped open. They're trying to figure out what's wrong with their broken down car, or possibly waiting for a tow truck. Whatever the case, we're talking about vehicles with people inside or outside their vehicle waiting for help. This may sound like common sense, and many of you probably already do this, pull over and slow down. But sadly, disabled vehicles are not currently protected within Kansas move over statutes, and we've seen the consequences. This sadly is a problem on our roads. Kansas crash statistics show that in just 4 years, from 2018 to 2022, it resulted in 13 fatalities, averaging 3 deaths every year. We see almost 200 crashes of this nature on every year on Kansas roads. In the same time period, 688 empty vehicles were struck while on the side of the road. Additionally, 64 crashes occurred with someone in the vehicle while on the side of the road during the same time period. Kansas already does have a slow down, move over law for emergency vehicles, so law enforcement, tow trucks, utility workers, and maintenance vehicles, but not for the average citizen dealing with a disabled vehicle on the side of the road. This bill does not apply to a vehicle left unattended on the side of the road. You may see the little orange sticker put on by law enforcement that vehicle needs to be towed. So we're not talking about that unattended vehicle. As mentioned, the bill does include a $75 fine for violations, and that's kind of in the middle of the violations for those other parts of the move over law, including law enforcement, tow trucks, utility vehicles. Senate bill, as mentioned, the Senate passed this 38-2 last month. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill in support of it. And AAA has this as a major priority as we try to enhance move over laws all across the country to include standards, everyday citizens changing a tire. One thing to point out is that law enforcement and tow truck drivers and others that are working on the side of the road have training. They know what to expect. They know to have their head on a swivel and how to deal with a situation on the side of the road. Whereas if you're changing a tire, you may have never been in that situation before and not have the expectation of the dangers or what to look for. So thank you again for your time. AAA urges your support, and I'll stand for any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Stewart? Representative Delperdane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you guys implemented this law in other states that did not previously have it? And what I'm kind of looking at is, do you have any stats from other states of, okay, we had X amount of either fatalities or accidents prior to, and this actually reduced it?
I'd have to find the statistics, but in terms of the number of states that have a disabled vehicle law, there are currently 21 that have it. 7 others, including Kansas, are working to include that in their move over law this year. So we are actively involved in all of the states that don't currently have it to have this enhancement made. But that's a good question. I'll make a note to try to get back with you on the difference that it's made.
Okay. Yeah, I would like a follow up on that. And then I know we're probably going to hear from law enforcement later on, but we currently have this law for emergency vehicles, but I question how many truly obey it. Nobody can tell me none of the law enforcement vehicles ever get hit out there stopped. I've seen it happen. But I'd like to know what can we do to help prevent some of this in the future? So thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Stewart? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we will have Kansas Highway Patrol, and we have Captain Brashears here with us today. Colonel Smith couldn't make it. Welcome to the committee, Captain. It's always good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I am Captain Candace Brashears with the Kansas Highway Patrol, and I am glad to be here today to speak as a supporter of Senate Bill 142. Current Kansas law provides that drivers, upon approaching a stationary authorized emergency vehicle using its emergency lights, are required to move into a lane not adjacent to the stationary emergency vehicle, or if moving to a lane not adjacent is impossible or unsafe, to slow down when approaching stationary emergency vehicles. Violation of this law also results in a $195 fine. Senate Bill 142 would result in a $75 fine. Authorized emergency vehicles include, but are not limited to, fire, police, and EMS vehicles and tow vehicles. Senate Bill 142 would essentially mirror the requirements of drivers approaching emergency vehicles and apply them to any stationary vehicle utilizing their hazard lights or other caution signals. Our troopers can attest to the danger they encounter on a daily basis when working on the side of the road. A matter of feet and sometimes even inches can be the difference between conducting a safe traffic stop and being seriously injured or killed after being struck by a passing vehicle. For that reason, we have laws to protect police, firefighters, emergency medical services, and tow truck operators. We believe the same level of care and attention should be afforded to stop motorists on our roadways. In 18 years with the Kansas Highway Patrol, I've witnessed more than a fair share of crashes that have resulted from failing to move over, both law enforcement and the traveling public. Many of my partners have been struck by motorists who failed to move over. We have shown instances on our social media where our patrol vehicles have been struck by vehicles that have failed to move over. I have been struck by a semi traveling at highway speeds while working a crash on the side of the road. And although that crash was not the result of a move over violation, many of them have been. And there's been numerous others that were a result of close calls. There are many citizens that have also been struck on the side of the road. And this bill would give our citizens protection needed for not if, but when they break down on the side of the road. Oftentimes, our citizens in the circumstances described by the bill are not given another choice but to stop on the shoulder of a highway after their tire is blown, their engine overheats, or when they have simply run low on fuel. We can all recall a time when our car has left us stranded on the and the feeling of a semi-truck whooshing past our window, the worry for our safety and our children in the back seat, and the dread of not knowing whether the next approaching vehicle may be just the one to cross the fog line and turn a bad day into a deadly day. The 3 feet or less between the fog line and a vehicle broke down on the shoulder does not give adequate space for our citizens to be protected from crashes. When vehicles going by at highway speeds go past vehicles on the shoulder, it shakes these vehicles, and if you have been in that situation, you know just how frightening this can be. This bill can protect all the citizens of Kansas from crashes that cause serious injury and death. We believe this law takes a common sense approach to remedying an unsafe situation. Kansas would join 21 other states with similar laws, including our neighbors in Oklahoma, Iowa, and Colorado. We appreciate that this bill takes into account traffic, weather and road conditions, and whether these movements would be safe to perform. We also believe that making Senate Bill 142 law, we would strengthen our other move over laws as it aligns our message across the board. If you see flashing lights, move over and slow down. In conclusion, the Kansas Highway Patrol strongly supports Senate Bill 142. Help protect our family. Help protect your family and protect all Kansans and those traveling through our state. Thank you to the members of the committee. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Captain. Representative Hauser.
Thank you. Captain, I got a question real quick. I understand that this law covers if you all have somebody pulled over and like the semi truck that almost hit you, did you get their number? And then how would that work? Would you like get their tag number or something and then turn it in? And then the question 2 would be, I'm assuming this protects civilians as well. And how do we enforce that on that area? You just have to be in the right place at the right time to see this happen or something like that. Because I want to make sure that they're protected just as well when you're not around.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hauser. Current Kansas law protects first responder vehicles, fire, EMS, police, tow truck drivers. So if there is someone that passes us when we're on the side of the road, yes, we can stop them and we can enforce that statute. Senate Bill 142 would allow us to enforce that law for regular motorists. And again, we may have to be in the right place at the right time to see these violations. But if we approach someone, there's a vehicle on the side of the road that's broke down, they have their hazard lights on, or they have cones, reflective things that are notifying the traveling public that there is something broke down on the side of the road, and vehicles do not move over for those regular citizens, then we can enforce that law for that failure to move over.
Okay, Captain. Pretend I'm an Uber driver and I'm driving down the highway and I have a blowout. A semi comes flying past me. I'm on a 2-lane road, by the way. I'm off on a dirt shoulder. And a semi comes blasted by me and it rocks my truck at 70 miles an hour. Nobody's there to catch him. Could I jot down his license number and report him?
You could report that, but unfortunately, without us having seen that violation, that's not something that we would be able to enforce. But the statute, Senate Bill 142, would give us more of an option to help to protect those citizens that have broke down.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your testimony and thank you for being here today. But this bill, like so many other ones, just lets me know you can't legislate out stupidity. And I think any vehicle alongside the road ought to be given the same treatment as a vehicle with flashing lights. If you see a person not moving over, slowing down for a disabled vehicle that's parked alongside the road with nobody around, no flashers going, can you stop them and tell them to knock it off, slow down?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Goddard. Unfortunately, with Senate Bill 142, if it's an abandoned vehicle that doesn't have those warning signals, that is not something that we could enforce. It would have to be a vehicle that has some sort of emergency signal, hazard lights, cone setup, reflective cones for us to be able to enforce that.
So, if I may, so that puts some of the burden on the owner or driver of the disabled vehicle. Let's take an electric vehicle that experiences total electrical failure. I mean, what can you do in that instance? I think that's something we may want to address in the future, but.
Mr. Chair, Representative Goddard, thank you for that question. There is an option, even on these electric vehicles, if they, and then this would be something to educate our electric vehicle owners on, is that their vehicle may break down. They may not have that capability to turn those flashers on. So it would be ideal for them to be able to carry some other sort of emergency notification device, such as those reflective cones in their trunk, for if there was an emergency and they broke down on the side of the road.
Okay, thank you. And then the third situation, a vehicle is out there, people are around it, the battery goes dead and the flashers aren't working. If there are people around the vehicle alongside the road and they don't have the capability to have their emergency flashers on, does this bill cover them?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Goddard. I believe that according to Senate Bill 142, they do have to have those flashers on. So it would be very imperative, and we would need to educate the public on whether or not they were out there for a very long time and their battery may die, that it was great to have that backup resource in their vehicle, whether it is reflective cones, some sort of flare, that way that they'd have that extra protection. And again, when people break down on the side of the road, it is common practice for us to educate people that they can call star 47 and law enforcement can come out to help them.
Well, thank you. I intend to support the bill, but I think we may start thinking about what we can do in the future to protect any vehicle or person alongside the roadway, whether they have their flashers on or not. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always that hard give and take on legislation like this. We definitely want to get something over the line if it's the will of the committee. Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know, well, I've had a relative of mine, unfortunately was a KDOT worker and was killed in an accident. And I know like there are double fines in work zones. Does this, would this say there's a KDOT crew on the side of the road? Is there anything that, as far as this goes, who could be used to prosecute someone in that type of instance? If say they, there was a highway worker, someone didn't move over for him. Was that it like in the existing statute or would it be covered in this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Collins. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to have to get back to you on that question.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for the captain? Representative Hallheisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Captain, for being here today. And I'll start off by saying I do support this concept. When I was a teenager, I had a friend who broke down one evening outside of Butler County, and he was under the hood of his van trying to figure out what was going on, and a car from behind took him out, and he had a 3-month-old child, not with him, but he had just had a child. So I do support this concept. I have one small worry, though, is that the enforcement starts right as soon as it's basically in the statute book, without any education whatsoever to drivers. Would you guys object to some kind of amendment that says the fines will start January 1, but you're able to pull them over now and issue from here on out till January or December 31st? You're able to issue them a warning, but January 1 is when we're really going to enforce this with the fines, and that gives KDOT and the public time to do a public awareness campaign that this is coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hoheisel. I appreciate that question. I think that would be something that we need to discuss with all safety partners involved. I can tell you, as someone that has been part of the safety education team within KHP, that although this law has not been something that's a law in Kansas as of yet, we have been educating on this for years, because this is a common sense thing. It is not just law enforcement and other emergency responders that should be protected on the side of the road. So regardless of whether or not this was law, we're still, and we have been educating the public on the fact that they should be, portraying that common courtesy to everyone on the road. So they've already been receiving that education.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Mr. Chair, if I may. Okay, and I appreciate that education, but I think the one difference is that we're making this a penalty now, and a fine, a monetary fine. So these individuals may not know, we get this, let's say we start enforcing this July 1, July 2, we're pulling people over. They're not aware, oh, this is a crime now, or this is a penalty now, a traffic infraction. And they weren't aware of it. And that's why I thought maybe we give that 6 month, basically from July to December, for the public awareness campaign of saying, hey, starting January 1, there is a fine involved in this. And I agree with you. Everybody should. I do it all the time. Everybody should. It is common sense to me. But I think people deserve to know that, hey, we're going to start fining you for this if you do this, with a little more runway than just day one. So that's my concern, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Captain.
Representative Neely.
Though I hate to do it since he's my illustrious chairman, I would definitely disagree with you and everything on that, because I think that we're already saying that this is a dangerous situation and that it needs to be stopped as soon as possible, if not yesterday. And I don't think that a warning or anything is necessary when people are driving erratically and going by people that are alongside the road with their hazards on. So I just agree with you on this.
I hope that was some other chairman other than me.
I saw him move his chair back there.
Mr. Chairman, if anybody would like to join my 9 a.m. Banking and Pensions Committee, I have a seat open now.
Captain, how important do you think by us making this conform across all types of vehicles and all users of our highways, how important is that to increase conformity or compliance with drivers and educate drivers across the state? How important is that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this bill is something that will make the education consistent across the board. Right now, we have protections for only first responders. And although we appreciate that, our citizens' safety is just as important as our safety is. So being able to portray that consistent message of move over or slow down if you're unable to makes that, it makes everyone's protections as important as everyone else's. This is a very important Senate bill. This is a very important issue, and I believe that passing this bill will help to keep all Kansans safe.
I just wanted to say that I know since we've started passing these laws for first responders and stuff, I'm much more cognizant of my need to practice this for all people that are on the side of the roads. And so even though it's anecdotal, I agree with you 100%. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Captain, and this may be a question for you, but it's also the reviser. A few years ago, did we pass a move over law that involved utilities?
Yeah, that's KSA 8-15, 114.
Thank you. I was just, we were talking about emergency vehicles, and thought in the back of my head, I think I was actually the one that did the gut and go on that and put the Senate bill on that. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Delperdane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of a drawn out conversation and maybe a question at the end, if I may. But I don't know if you ever gone deer hunting. I went deer hunting on February 18th, 2019 on the Kansas Turnpike, mile marker 154. Remember it well. Just popped me a big one. Sat out there for hour and a half waiting on highway patrol. Nobody. Meantime, the semis are passing extremely close, and they're trying to see if they can maybe blow your hair or so as they go by. As a result, I came to this committee on January 24th of 2020, and I introduced House Bill 2497, which wording is almost identical to the one we're doing right now. And at that time, I was told nobody cares about this. It's not something we're ever going to run above the line. So the question I've got to anybody that wants to answer it here is, how is this one different from the one I did in 2020 that nobody cares about?
A senator did this instead of Representative Delperdang.
Maybe so, but something needs to happen. I am concerned about what Representative Hauser brought up. How do we enforce this? If I'm out there and I'm waiting an hour and a half for a trooper to even show up, which by the way never did show, and I drove on in here and then I got accused of leaving the scene of an accident, which we worked out. But how do we enforce it? What do I do with the semi that damn near hits me time and time again? You know, do we need to put something in here that says if we supply a tag to you or something, what do you do where you haven't witnessed it? Concern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Delperdang. That is a concern right now. If we don't see that violation, we cannot enforce that. There can be additional education on that, on the law, which there will be, regardless of whether the fines begin in July or they begin in January. But that is something to consider. But as things are right now, we have to be able to see that violation to be able to enforce that.
Any other questions for the captain? Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That raises a question after the former representative just spoke. The past over there. No, the previous. How is this different though when I hear on TV and read in articles that this accident occurred on the highway and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. If you were a witness, would you please call this number and let us know what has happened there? They want to know, did someone else see it and everything else? And there's a big deal about that. Is there some way that even though you weren't there, but what they're saying other people did, and we know they do that in cases of road rage or other accidents on the highway, how can they do it? Because they're going to take the word of a witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Ballard. That's a great question. So we do always encourage the public to call in as witnesses, especially in situations of crashes where there is more investigation to figure out what happened. As to whether or not we could use that information for a violation that doesn't have a crash involved, I don't believe at this time we could, but we do always encourage people to call in to report dangerous and aggressive behaviors.
Yeah. Okay, in this case, there has to be an accident or someone has to die or something else. And what they're saying is, I could have been that statistic because I'm sitting here and I have sat on the side when I had a problem with my car. And when that 18-wheeler goes by, I mean, that car shakes. And not only was the car shaking, I was. But nothing happened to me. But you're saying, if I called in and said license plate so and so passed by and they did this, or the 18-wheeler, blah, 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 you can't send a warning to them. I know it'd have to be in here that you were seen doing this. People do it if they see people driving erratically on the highway, or they report them because they crossed the lane or they did something else. How is this different?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Ballard. This is something that we can take into consideration to see how we can look to this for the future. But as of right now, I don't have a better answer for your question.
And I appreciate that. And I know we didn't have it in here, but I had to support that because I think this is legitimate. Most people get away with it because no one sees it. And what we're saying now is you got to stop doing it. But if they also knew that because they didn't see a highway patrol, somebody saw it.
Any other questions for the captain? Representative Mountain.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just have a comment. About 3 weeks ago, I was at mile marker 189 and I had a flat really quickly. and called OnStar, and they sent Trooper Cody something out. I can't remember. And he waited with me the whole time, but I've never been on the side of the road, and it's terrifying, actually. And I was afraid for him as well. But he went way beyond the call, in my opinion. I did write a letter saying what a great job he did. But thank you guys for what you do. Stay safe.
Thank you, Representative Melton.
Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a comment, thank you for being here and fielding the tough questions. I hope you have your bulletproof vest on. Thank you.
Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. All this conversation that I've actually seen crashes that happen like this in my other life. In fact, I have a good friend that was a trooper out in Lincoln County. He had stopped the vehicle on those little hills out there, and a car came over and just took out the back of his state trooper car. He was okay. He had jumped out of the way. What gives me a little heartburn here is because I get crazy about this is cars that are going around stopped school buses that are on a road, usually in a city. And I've noticed that a lot of times as they're coming to a stop where they're going to pick up or drop off kids, that their flashers, not the reds, but their flashers come on first. But they're almost stopped. But what I see is before, and I don't know how many seconds it is, that once they're pretty much stopped and the arm comes out and the reds come on, that it's almost like, let's get to the finish line before the red comes out, and they go around those stopped school buses, which gives me a lot of angst. And when it says proceed with due caution, once those flashers come on, even before the red arm comes out, is that going to present a problem for law enforcement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Weigel, I believe in reference to school buses that they're covered under a different statute. So this is not relating to our school buses and stopping to pick up and drop off children. There is fines and statute related to those school buses when they're dropping off and picking up children. So I don't believe that applies to this statute.
Okay, so there's a distinction between Senate Bill 142 and whatever statutes are on the books now for approaching a stopped or stopping school bus.
School buses are different, yes.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the captain? Not. Thank you very much for your testimony, Captain. All right. Next on the agenda, we have Joel Skelly with the Kansas Department of Transportation. Welcome to the committee, Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great conversation so far. My name is Joel Skelly, Director of Policy for KDOT. A lot of what you have in my testimony has already been talked about, so I'd like to say just ditto and drop the mic, but I can't do that. I think there are some things that have been discussed that I would like to address that tie into my testimony that you have, or the agency's testimony. To Representative Collins' question, as far as KDOT workers, our workers are currently covered under state law, so that is in effect. So if we're in a construction zone and if we're on the side of the road doing work, those workers are currently covered. You're supposed to move over, just like with the emergency response folks, the utility workers. And I believe, I'm not sure if I heard it mentioned, but trash trucks are also, or waste haulers are also covered under that when they're making those movements. There are four items really that I want to address that I think have been talked about here a little bit, but not really officially itemized, and that is there are 4 E's for safety that we go on, and that is engineering, enforcement, which has been a lot of the conversation, emergency response, which is another piece, and the last one that I want to kind of focus in on is education. And that is a piece that we as an agency at KDOT try to focus on, and it's been talked about a little bit here, but in order to properly and effectively educate people who are the traveling public about this, clear and simple and consistent laws across the board are very helpful. And in this case, where we're adding in that is basically all vehicles that are disabled along the roadways, that makes it far easier for us to educate people to say, you know what, if you see a disabled vehicle or any vehicle that's on the side of the road, you should use your common sense and slow down if possible and move over for safety reasons. Again, those are items that we feel we can help the cause here to enhance that, where we can provide that education. We've got all of our other safety partners out there that are doing education. We've got safety partners that do the enforcement aspect. Shoulders were talked about a little bit here with the 3-foot shoulder. Engineering comes into that too. There are certain circumstances where we're able to provide better shoulders on different roads, but that's not for every road. So again, this is the idea that there are 4 E's that we try to utilize across the board. Not one simple solution can happen to make this work. It's a group effort. And when I say it's a group effort, it's across those 4 E's, but it's also everybody's responsibility to provide that common sense thinking when you're driving, that you need to be safe for yourself as well as others. Again, it was mentioned earlier, there were over 700 crashes that involved or resulted in 13 fatalities because of not moving over and a disabled vehicle where there was potentially someone in the vehicle or someone that was outside of the vehicle as a vulnerable road user that may have been trying to change their tire or any number of things. So again, those things are things that I wanted to focus in on. We are very supportive of this bill because it further enhances the safety of the traveling public along our roadways. And yeah, I will leave it at that and answer any questions that people have.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Skelly? Representative Delperdane.
Thank you for being here again. You had mentioned the highway workers. I knew there was an existing statute, but if someone hits one in the state, do you know what the fine is for that? Because in some states, you see the signs $10,000 fine for hitting the worker. And I don't think we've got that.
I don't think it's a $10,000 fine. We do have, I'm going to have to phone a friend here and ask the revisor to potentially assist with that. He would probably know better as far as the actual fines for hitting someone.
Chris, what's your phone number?
Do you have an answer on that?
I can contact the front office, and I probably won't be there in my office, but sorry. Anyways, I think we discussed this earlier for another bill. I don't believe there is a specific fine for hitting a highway worker on a highway. Now, there could be a crime that's committed with that operation. I have to do a little more research. For just passing a highway worker, not properly yielding the right of way, it's that's KSA 8-1531. It's $105 fine, but that's just for the traffic infraction for not yielding the right of way to those workers.
Okay. And that may be something we could follow up next year. I'd love to investigate that further, but thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Scully, thank you for being here. Would this bill require a change to road signage that's currently out there where I believe they say something to the effect of move over, slow down for emergency vehicles? Would you have to change your road signs for this bill?
So I do not believe we would have to change our road signs. I think that would be something that we would take under consideration. Again, we follow what's called the Uniform Traffic Code, or Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Wow, I was way off to start there. Which basically helps us set standards or follow the standards for the signage. So we would basically follow that and try and look at what this might mean.
I was just thinking it might be a way to educate the public is having the signs out there to include other vehicles other than your emergency vehicles that are alongside the road. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Committee, if you'll look in our S drive and testimony, we have written testimony as a proponent by Phyllis Larimore with Safe Kids Kansas, Ed Klump with law enforcement, and do we have any other proponent testimony? Would anybody like to testify? Do we have any opponents? Seeing none, do we have any neutral? Okay, I don't see any. So we'll go ahead and close the hearing on SB 142. Looking ahead, committee, we won't have a meeting Friday or Monday. Tuesday, the game plan is at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to have a report from KDOT on airport facilities. They had an inventory and needs assessment done. Then we will have hearings on SB 272. That's the bill that's going through to increase funding to the Airport Development Fund. And then another one on GPS positions. It's kind of a surveyor type thing, went through the consent calendar on the Senate. So that's our plan for Tuesday. Wednesday, we'll have a presentation from the Drive to Zero committee, a coalition, talking about safety in Kansas, what it looks like. And we'll also have a presentation by Colonel Smith with the Kansas Highway Patrol on excessive speed in Kansas. There was a bill for speeding in excess of 100 miles an hour. And when we talk about enforcement, you know, I'm not sure there's a provision that you can send in the license plate for the guy that's doing excessive speed either. But he's going to be here. And so if you have a chance, you might look at the bill that was in the Senate that didn't get out on excessive speed over 100 miles an hour. I know they're very interested in what the legislature would support as far as doing something on that to help them with their enforcement on over 100 miles an hour now. So that's the latest push on it. I know we've seen it a lot of different ways. So also be aware that next week on the agenda, I've got a number of things about possible final action on bills previously heard. So if you have strong feelings about a bill, try to get your amendments through as soon as possible. There's a couple of these I think we're going to try to put on the consent agenda just to see if we can get them through, which would be that GPS one that I'm talking about that we're going to hear next Tuesday, and then there was one we did last. Oh yeah, that one where we're changing the reporting date on that one form from the 20th to the 25th. So anyway, don't be surprised if we ask for a motion to put those on the consent agenda pretty quick here. So, okay, there's nothing else for the committee. KDOT's got their results of their local consults. So I know many of us would be interested in what happens there. So we're adjourned.